I was working the morning shift at Brussels Central Station when this guy from Texas showed up at the ticket counter with 3 printed emails, a crumpled receipt, and what looked like genuine panic in his eyes. He'd bought a train ticket to Brussels online, but he was standing in Brussels, and his train to Amsterdam had left 20 minutes ago from Brussels Midi, which is a completely different station across town. He kept saying, "But I'm in Brussels," like the city only had one train station. I had to pull up a map to show him we have 3 major stations. He stared at it for a solid 10 seconds before whispering, "Y'all have 3 whole train stations for one city?" In Texas, apparently, 1 station per city is standard. Welcome to Europe. I've been collecting stories like this for years. The small cultural blind spots that reveal something much bigger. If you're the kind of person who likes understanding the why behind what most people miss, you'll want to stay locked in. Subscribe. This channel is built for the curious few who don't settle for surface level. That same week, a woman from Florida missed her connection in Munich because she didn't know regional trains don't have assigned seats. She'd spent 15 minutes walking through 6 cars looking for seat 42B, while the train sat at the platform. When she finally asked someone, they looked at her like she'd asked where the steering wheel was. "Just sit down," they said. "Anywhere." She was so flustered she got off the train entirely and watched it leave without her. Then there was the college kid in Prague who got fined for having his feet on the seat, not his shoes, his socked feet. He'd taken his sneakers off because it was hot, figured socks were basically slippers, and propped them up on the seat across from him. The ticket inspector didn't even say hello, just wrote the fine, handed it over, and moved on. 40 euros for feet. The kid kept saying, "But I took my shoes off. I was being respectful." I've been working train stations across Europe for 6 years now. Information desks, ticket counters, platform assistants. And I can tell you this, Americans and European train etiquette mix about as well as oil and vinegar. They show up expecting Amtrak. They get Deutsche Bahn. And suddenly, everything they thought they knew about trains just evaporates. But that was just the beginning. The quiet car situation in Switzerland was probably the worst I've personally witnessed. I was covering a shift in Zurich HB when this family of 4 from Michigan boarded an intercity train to Geneva. Mom, Dad, 2 kids around 7 and 9. They had sandwiches from the station McDonald's, iPads for both kids, and zero awareness that they'd sat down in the Ruhebereich, the silence zone. Within 3 minutes, both kids were watching videos at full volume, not even with headphones dangling around their necks. Just raw, unfiltered YouTube kids blasting through the car. The mom was FaceTiming someone back home, talking at full volume about their hotel. The dad was on a work call, in a Swiss quiet car. On a Tuesday morning, the reactions started immediately. An older Swiss woman, 2 rows up, turned around with this look that could have curdled milk. A businessman in a suit closed his laptop with the kind of careful, deliberate movement that screams, "I am controlling my rage." Nobody said anything yet. That's the Swiss way. They just stared. Cold, neutral, absolutely devastating stares. The family didn't notice for another 5 minutes. They were in their own bubble, completely locked in. Then a conductor came through for tickets, saw what was happening, and said something in Swiss German to the dad. The dad smiled, handed over their tickets, said, "Thanks, buddy," in that cheerful American way, and went back to his call. The conductor's face barely moved, but I saw him make a mark on his little notepad. He said, in perfect English, "This is the quiet zone. No phone calls, no videos, no loud conversation." The mom looked around like she'd just woken up, saw the silence zone symbol on the window and went, "Oh, shoot." But she said it loudly, in the quiet car. After being told it was a quiet car, they did lower their voices. For about 30 seconds, then the kids started arguing about whose turn it was on the iPad, and the volume crept right back up. The businessman finally snapped, He stood up, walked over, and said in this incredibly controlled voice, "This is not your private living room." People paid for silence. Either respect that or move to a different car. The dad got defensive immediately. "Hey man, we're just trying to keep our kids entertained. It's a long trip." The businessman didn't even respond. He just went back to his seat, put on noise-canceling headphones, and radiated disapproval for the next hour. The family stayed in the quiet car the entire journey, whispering loudly and occasionally shushing the kids, who clearly had no idea why they suddenly had to be quiet on a train. Another time, in Copenhagen, I watched an American guy take a phone call in the quiet zone of an Øresundstog train. Normal conversation at first. Then he started laughing. Big, booming laughter that echoed through the whole car. A Danish teenager across the aisle leaned over and politely said, "Excuse me, this is the quiet zone." The guy covered his phone, said, "I'll just be a minute," and kept talking. Kept laughing. The teenager looked at his friend, they both shook their heads, and they got up and moved to a different car entirely rather than deal with it. The thing is, Americans are used to talking on trains. Amtrak has quiet cars, sure, but they're not enforced like this. There's a cultural assumption that public space is fair game for noise as long as you're not screaming. In Northern Europe especially, that assumption is completely backward. The train isn't a social space. It's a moving library where you happen to be traveling. I saw this clash play out again in Germany, on a Deutsche Bahn EC train from Frankfurt to Berlin. A group of American study abroad students got on, maybe 5 of them, all around 19 or 20. They sat in the quiet car without checking the signage and immediately started this loud, excited conversation about their weekend plans. Laughing, teasing each other, the whole vibe of people who are having a great time and want everyone to know it. A German man in his 50s, sitting across the aisle, tapped one of them on the shoulder and said, "Ruhe bitte. Quiet, please." The student smiled, said, "Oh, sorry," and they all lowered their voices. For maybe 2 minutes. Then the conversation built back up naturally, the way conversations do, until they were back at full volume. The man didn't tap them again. He pressed the call button for the conductor. When the conductor arrived, he explained the situation in rapid German, gestured at the quiet car symbol, and sat back down. The conductor told the students they needed to move to a different car or stay silent. One of the students said, "We're literally whispering." They were not whispering. Not even close. The conductor just pointed toward the next car and waited. They gathered their bags and moved, muttering about how uptight everyone was. Here's the thing about quiet cars in Europe. They're not a suggestion. They're a social contract. You sit there, you stay silent. It's that simple. But Americans are used to rules having flex, having room for interpretation. Quiet back home might mean lower your voice a bit. In Switzerland or Germany or Denmark, quiet means actually, genuinely quiet. The culture shock is real. I was helping passengers at Milano Centrale when this couple from California approached me, looking stressed. They'd bought tickets for a Frecciarossa train to Venice, but didn't realize the reservation showed car and seat numbers. They'd just gotten on the train, sat in the first empty seats they saw, and now someone was standing over them holding a ticket and gesturing at the seat numbers above their heads. The husband kept saying, "But these seats were empty when we got here." I had to explain that reservations aren't optional on high-speed trains in Italy. If your ticket says Car 7, seats 42A and 42B, you sit in Car 7, seats 42A and 42B. Not approximately there. Not close enough. Exactly there. The wife looked at their tickets, realized they were supposed to be 3 cars down, and they had to gather all their bags and shuffle through a packed train while people glared. This happens constantly. Americans are used to general admission on regional trains or Amtrak's sit anywhere in your class system. European reserved seating is extremely literal, and if you're in someone's spot, They will absolutely make you move. No polite, "Oh, it's fine. I'll just sit here instead." You're in their seat. Move. I watched a similar disaster unfold in Madrid. An older American couple, maybe mid-60s, had boarded an AVE train to Barcelona and settled into 2 seats by the window. They'd put their coats up on the rack, opened a bag of nuts, spread out a little bit. Comfortable. Then a Spanish family showed up with tickets for those exact seats. The American couple didn't understand at first. They thought maybe the family was confused. The Spanish dad pulled out his phone, showed them the reservation, pointed at the seat numbers, and waited. The American husband said, "Can't you just sit somewhere else? We're already settled." The Spanish dad just stared at him. Didn't argue, didn't explain. Just stood there holding his phone up like it was a badge. Eventually, the couple realized this wasn't a negotiation and moved to their actual assigned seats, which were in the middle of the car with no window view. The wife was annoyed for the entire trip. I overheard her telling her husband, "We should have just stayed put." What were they going to do? What they were going to do is stand there until you moved, because in Spain, like most of Europe, assigned seats are sacred. You don't debate them. You don't negotiate. You sit where your ticket tells you to sit. The most absurd version of this I've seen was in Poland, on a PKP intercity train from Warsaw to Krakow. A guy from Nevada had booked a ticket online, but somehow ended up with a reservation in second class while holding a first-class ticket. He didn't notice until he sat down in first class and a conductor came through to check. The conductor told him his reservation was in car 8, second class. The guy said, "But I paid for first class." Turns out he'd clicked the wrong option during booking. His ticket said first class, but his reservation didn't match. In his mind, the ticket should override the reservation. In Poland, the reservation is what matters. The conductor was firm, you sit where you're reserved, or you buy a new reservation. The guy refused, said he'd paid for first class and wasn't moving to second. The conductor threatened to remove him at the next stop. They went back and forth for 10 minutes. Other passengers were getting uncomfortable. Finally, another American who spoke some Polish explained the situation. It doesn't matter what you paid for, it matters what's on your reservation. The guy from Nevada was furious, but eventually moved. He spent the rest of the journey standing in the corridor because all the second-class seats were taken, muttering about how backward the system was. The thing Americans don't get is that European train systems are designed around precision. Reserved means reserved. Assigned means assigned. There's no wiggle room, no close enough policy. If you're in the wrong seat, you're breaking the system, and the system does not bend. I've also seen this play out in France, on a TGV from Paris to Lyon. A young American woman, maybe 25, traveling solo with a huge backpack. She'd reserved a seat, but couldn't figure out which direction the train was facing, so she sat in a backward-facing seat instead of her assigned forward-facing one. The French businessman who had reserved the backward seat showed up, saw her there and said, "Pardon, c'est ma place." That's my seat. She looked at her ticket, realized her mistake, but her actual seat was completely blocked by luggage someone else had stored in the aisle. She tried to explain this. He didn't care. He wanted his seat. She had to move anyway, squeeze past the luggage, and wedge herself into a spot she could barely access. The businessman sat down, opened his newspaper, and didn't acknowledge her struggle for even a second. I was stationed at Roma Termini information desk when this guy from Ohio came up, holding a crumpled regional train ticket, asking why he'd been fined €50. He'd bought the ticket from a machine, gotten on the train, and 20 minutes later, a conductor hit him with a fine for traveling without a valid ticket. The guy was baffled. He had the ticket. He'd paid for it. What was the problem? The problem was that he didn't validate it. In Italy, regional train tickets have to be stamped in those little yellow or green machines before you board. It prints the date and time, proving you're using it for that specific journey. If you don't validate, the ticket is technically worthless. The guy had no idea those machines existed. He thought buying the ticket was the whole process. Now, he was out 50 euros and convinced the system was a scam. This is such a common mistake that I'd started warning Americans preemptively whenever I saw them buying regional tickets. But not everyone stops at the information desk. Some people just buy and board, and then they're shocked when the rules aren't what they expected. A similar thing happened in Hungary. I was traveling myself, heading from Budapest to Eger, when I overheard an American couple arguing with a conductor in the next row. They'd bought tickets on their phone using the MAV app but hadn't activated them. The app requires you to press Activate Ticket before boarding, which starts a countdown timer. If you don't activate, the QR code doesn't work. The conductor scanned their tickets, got an error, and told them they were traveling without valid tickets. The couple insisted they'd paid. They showed him their bank statement on their phone, showed him the purchase confirmation email. He didn't care. The tickets weren't activated, so they weren't valid. He gave them the option to pay for new tickets on the spot or get off at the next station. They paid, frustrated and confused, and spent the rest of the trip trying to figure out where they'd gone wrong. In Austria, I watched a tourist from Michigan get fined on a Vienna tram because she didn't realize you had to buy the ticket before boarding. She'd assumed you could pay the driver, like on American buses. But Vienna's trams are honor system. You're supposed to have a ticket already, bought from a machine or an app. Inspectors do random checks, and if you don't have one, that's an automatic fine. She tried explaining she'd just gotten on and was planning to figure it out. The inspector didn't care. Rules are rules. 60 euros. No exceptions. The most frustrating version of this I've dealt with was in Belgium, where a guy from Arizona had bought a ticket for a train from Bruges to Brussels, but accidentally got on an IC train instead of a local train. Same route, different train type, different price. His ticket wasn't valid. The conductor told him he needed to pay the price difference, plus a fee for boarding without the correct ticket. The guy argued that nobody had explained train types to him when he bought the ticket. The conductor, in the flattest voice imaginable, said, "It is written on the platform signs. It is written on the train. It is written on your ticket." And then waited for payment. What Americans don't realize is that European train systems assume you know the rules. There's no hand-holding, no conductors explaining procedures. You're expected to research, read signs, and follow the system exactly as it's designed. If you don't, the penalties are swift and non-negotiable. It's a completely different philosophy from American transportation, where there's usually some flexibility, some grace period for honest mistakes. In Romania, I saw an American student traveling from Bucharest to Brașov get fined because his student discount ticket wasn't accompanied by an international student ID card. He had his American college ID, but that didn't count. CFR requires an ISIC card specifically. He didn't have one. The conductor told him his discounted ticket was invalid and he needed to pay full price. The student said he was a student, showed his school ID, even pulled up his university email. None of it mattered. No ISIC card, no discount. He paid the difference while other passengers watched in silence. The validation and documentation rules across Europe are wildly inconsistent, and Americans, who are used to fairly uniform systems, get absolutely blindsided. In some countries, you validate. In some, you don't. In some, you need printed tickets. In some, digital is fine. In some, you need a physical ID that matches a specific format. There's no universal logic, and every mistake costs money. The wildest train etiquette disaster I've ever seen happened on an overnight sleeper train from Vienna to Venice. I wasn't working that trip. I was traveling for vacation, but I ended up right in the middle of it. A couple from Arizona had booked a couchette, which in Europe is a shared compartment with 6 bunks. 3 on each side, strangers mixed together. They didn't realize this. They thought couchette meant a private room. So they get to their compartment, see 4 other people already settling in for the night, and the wife absolutely loses it. She's convinced there's been a mistake. She goes out into the corridor, finds the conductor, and starts insisting they've been double-booked. The conductor pulls out his little tablet, shows her the reservation details, and explains that couchettes are always shared. That's the whole point. If you want privacy, you book a sleeper cabin, which costs 3 times as much. The wife does not accept this. She says they were never told it was shared. She's not staying in a room with strangers. Her husband is backing her up, saying this is a safety issue. They have luggage. They can't sleep in a room with random people. The conductor is stuck between sympathy and policy. He explains there are no private cabins available. The train is sold out. Their options are sleep in the couchette with everyone else or sit in the regular seats all night. The couple decides to sit in the seats. They drag their suitcases out of the compartment, apologize to the other passengers, and camp out in the corridor seating area for 9 hours. I passed them around 2 a.m. on my way to the bathroom. Both of them were awake, slumped against their luggage, looking miserable. The wife saw me and said, "Never taking a European train again." Here's the thing, though. The information was available. The booking site explained what a couchette was. The ticket confirmation listed it as 6-berth shared compartment. They just didn't read it carefully. Or they assumed European trains worked like Amtrak, where sleeper compartments are private by default. And that assumption cost them a full night's sleep. That's the pattern with American train struggles in Europe. It's almost never malicious. It's usually just assumptions crashing into reality. Assumptions that trains are casual, flexible, forgiving. That rules are guidelines. That assigned seats are suggestions. That someone will help you if you make a mistake. European train culture doesn't work that way. It's precise, unforgiving, and built on the expectation that passengers will educate themselves before boarding. And these stories? They never stop coming. Every shift brings a new passenger who didn't validate their ticket, didn't check their reservation, didn't realize the quiet car was actually quiet. I've stopped being surprised. Now I just wait, watch, and occasionally step in to translate the unspoken rules before someone gets fined or yelled at by a very calm, very determined Northern European with no patience for chaos. The trains keep running. The Americans keep boarding. And somewhere between Brussels and Budapest, someone's about to learn that train etiquette in Europe isn't a suggestion. It's survival.